I mean, Vic, you are on your own. Look at this. You're going to be interviewed by 4 women. Sure. Yeah, that might be a good thing. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Um, I was telling some of the people. I think it was just Julian. Okay. But I listened to this whole thing. Sue and I listened to everything. And it was excellent. Actually, I'm glad that I'm able to do this again because it really gives me an opportunity to focus on some things. But I think you're going to find it really fruitful. And today's, it's good. So for those of us who have 6 to 12-year-olds, in this room it's just, right?
No, I have a 6-year-old.
Oh, you do? That's right. How old is he?
He's 6.
He's 6, exactly.
Yeah, we're 6 and a half.
Okay, so he's just coming out of that early stage. So I think you're going to find this to be really fruitful. How old is Arnie?
6.
Turning 6.
Okay, so I think for both of you, it's going to be really great because you're going to get a real sense of this next developmental stage, and I think it'll really be fruitful for you. Once we hit the teens, 13 and on, oh boy, I was thinking everyone should do this because it's so worthwhile for teens. And one of the things he ends the whole series with is that you're going to, at the end of it, say, I wish I watched this when I was had really young kids, right? It would have helped so much, and then you feel almost perhaps guilty or regret. And the thing that I think he really does a great job with is he says, in the end, God is sovereign. There's a reason why you're learning this now. And rather than feeling regret, it's still an opportunity. It's not too late, no matter where you're at. So even though you might be, and for most of us in this room, you're pretty much at a good stage of building foundations. I think probably for the 3 of us, there are a lot of things that I think I would be like, I wish I listened to that, thought about that earlier rather than hearing it now. But always remembering that God is sovereign. There's a reason why you're hearing it today, right? And it's not too late.
Are there any huge aha moments that you thought, I wish I knew that then?
It's constant.
Specific, anything?
It's constant. I think one of the key themes for me has been times where I grew frustrated with my kids. I saw them as moments of anger rather than moments of ministry. And to me, when I faced those moments, I react in my flesh. I'm just impatient. I'm naturally impatient. That's my sin. And it's really one of my, I'm not going to call it weakness. I'm going to call it one of my sins that I struggle with, really, just as a human being. My children are God's means of sanctification for me in my life. My wife is too, but my children. And one of the things that I've come to realize is that I have really not seen that as an opportunity of growth and of my own growth, my own sense of learning more about who the Lord is in my life. And so I walk away from this, even with that, just that one big aha moment, is to say, okay, I've been away from my kids for 2 weeks, right? So it's actually been really interesting because Sue and I have spent 2 weeks alone, 24 hours a day.
You guys are looking really good.
Looking
younger.
We went without the kids. My kids are with my parents in New Jersey. They're coming back tomorrow. So we have literally spent 2 weeks without our children. And we haven't done this ever. No, we did this once before, but it was for 5 days at our 10th anniversary. Sue's parents looked after him. And Jack was 1 at that time. But now, we've not had them. And it's been great. We miss them a lot. But one of the things I'm thinking is, okay, what am I going to do when they come back? How am I going to respond? And so I'm really praying that, oh, Lord, please help me have changed a little bit. So that's my big aha. There are more, but that's a big one for me. Anyone have that aha with what I just said? That it's an opportunity rather than something that drives you bonkers?
I had it today.
Yeah. And you see, you get to apply it almost immediately.
Yeah.
Right? All the time.
Totally.
So let's watch it together. Okay.
Was that being recorded?
Do you want me to try to come back with that?
Yeah. harmful to our children as the things we do say. So again, let's take that instance, for example. Two kids are fighting over a toy, and I say, who had it first? And Jimmy did. Okay, Jimmy, you get it first. And then after that, Johnny, you get it after. But his point is that I'm conveying a message. And the message is that the ability to choose a toy is totally based, the right to the toy is totally based on timing. So then how can I say share? See, it's a mixed message. If I'm telling my child to hey, you better share, learn how to share, right? But then if I'm saying who had it first, it's almost the contrary message. They can't really grasp that idea. And that's something that they're going through regularly, whether we realize it or not. And it's based on some things that we're ordinarily doing without even thinking about it. What do you think?
So, I mean, they do that at like preschool too.
Yes.
Like kids fight with toys all the time. So whoever got to play with it first, they have the first, pick, or they get to play with it until they're done.
Right.
Then it goes to the next person.
Right.
So, I don't know. So what should we do?
So they're teaching a value there, right? It's hard to combat that. I mean, like, so I have 4 children, right? And obviously with 4 children, you're always wrestling with things like that, right? And I'm sorry to say, I'll bring up my son again. Because he is the youngest, and my greatest fear was that he was going to be this boy, eventually man of entitlement. Because he has 3 sisters. And they're going to almost by nature cater to him sometimes more than they realize. So I'm constantly talking to him about, you need to be willing to be second or third in line. If there's food, he will jump up and go first. I mean, if we were all having a dinner together, he will run on his own. If I didn't have these conversations, he would literally run up and grab the food. I've already talked to him about 2 or 3 times because he's done this before at church events. I'll see him there and he's getting up and ahead of everybody, running up saying, it's great, it's buffet and I get to eat first. And so I go home and I start having a conversation with him. So why are you that hungry? Why are you running up there like that? And he doesn't know the answer. He just, but do you know why he's doing that?
His opportunity to go first.
Yeah, what is that? But in his heart, what's going on?
Selfishness.
Selfishness. It's just that's what it boils down to, right? So in the nursery, let's say nursery context, even though they're learning that, I want my child to say, you know what? Whatever the child's name is, right? Even if everyone chooses it first, it's okay to choose second. Like, why do I have to let that teacher determine the worldview? Because they are learning a worldview. Oh, whoever touches it first gets to keep it. And I can teach my child, you know what? Why don't you, if you touch it first, why don't you offer it to that other child over there? That's a powerful opportunity of learning character versus that I touch it, it's mine. Give it to me. Because that's what they're learning now. When you all you're entering into that 6-year-old stage. I mean, they've always had it, but now, especially as they're interacting with other kids. Do you remember the early stages of parenting where your children were really young, and when they met other kids, how would they play together? When they're very young, like toddlers.
Scratch.
Even before that, if they're playing, they like each other. How would they play? Very young.
Silo?
What's that?
Silo?
What does that mean?
They play like on their own next to each other?
Yes. Yes. So that's what it's like in the very early developmental stages, right? But now they're shifting into really developing relationships. But with that comes some of the challenges of relationship too, right? And one of the main areas of conflict is what? at that stage? The 6 to 12, maybe early 6, 7, 8. You know what the main stage is? What's the main issues of conflict?
It's entitlement.
Yeah. So how do you combat that? As a parent, how do you combat that?
Helping them understand the goodness of sharing. I don't know that they grasp that.
Yeah.
You know, the benefits of sharing.
Yes. Yeah. That's huge, though, don't you think, Julia? Because if I said to you, share, and you don't understand the benefit of it, then I'm forcing you to do something that you don't really understand, and it has no real significance to you, other than it's a command of my mom.
From something being taken away from you.
Yeah, that's it. Versus, here's why you should share. That's a conversation that you're probably going to have to repeat over and over again, because they're not going to get it in the first shot. Then it might not even get it in the 100th shot. You're going to have to constantly talk this through with them. But eventually they will get it. I know it's hard to imagine, but they will. Maybe it might take 5 times, 100 times, maybe 1,000 times. But if you're persistent and you're regularly interacting with your child and explaining to them what sharing is, why you're doing it, what benefits there are to it, how it can help you grow as a person, ultimately as someone who loves the Lord. Another way to include that is how God shares with us. He shared his own son. You know, he didn't withhold his own son. His very best. So, and he did it for our joy. The promise of sharing is ultimately joy. A giving person is a wonderful person. But that's a conversation, right? We need to have that conversation regularly. And if you're not having that conversation because you're too tired, well then, you shouldn't be surprised when they're selfish and entitled. Because in some sense, we're selfish and entitled. We're tired. We don't want to have this conversation. So therefore, I'm just going to take the shortcut, which is, who had it first? You had it? Okay, you get it. That's the shortcut. Any thoughts or questions?
So, you know, my kids, those two, they fight all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And especially my younger one, always wants whatever the older brother has. Always. And so a lot of times they're fighting, and it's, you know, older brother's toy, but he always wants it. So we always say, you know, this is, you know, his toy. You have to wait until he says it's okay for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then my older one always says, oh, he didn't ask me. You know, he always, you know, this is my toy.
Uh-huh.
But then I ask, you know, sometimes when he's being stubborn, a lot of times he does share, but a lot of times he's being stubborn, I say, can't you just share? And then sometimes he just, you know, says no. Then I feel like that, you know, but is it okay that, you know, because it's his, for him, that he has choice not to share?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess
It's a
I'll
great
talk
question.
Yeah.
That's a great question. What do you all think about that question? It's a really good question.
I think like with any conflict, it's always two sides. You know what I mean? I feel like whenever Stella does take something of Arden's, there is a lack of respect for her brother's stuff. But then at the same time, Arden also needs to share. Like if there's no like, you know what I mean? It's just because we share everything. We're a family.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like it's always both sides that needs to be talked through. Like everything needs to be. It's not like, oh, there's always like one person wrong or one person right, because it's always both sides that.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Speaking to that situation. Ellen?
I'm trying to remember. The problem with these classes, I'm spending so much time trying to remember. But just hearing that situation, I mean, the way I would it's just my reaction to handle that is for the younger one to say, yes, it is your brother's and you can't take it without his permission until he says yes. But with the older one, I would have to talk about sharing it.
Right.
So that's just the first thing that comes to mind. So that's how I probably would have handled it that way.
Yeah. So you both basically had the same solution. Anything different? Yeah. Great. Or similar? So you don't go by what you remember. Go by what you think today.
I think again, it's what you bring up is what's the purpose, or why do we share? Because you said it's God. I mean, God. If God gave His best, His Son, if He didn't share, then we wouldn't have His Son. We wouldn't have. I know it's kind of hard to think when when a mom has millions of things on their minds, like cooking, cleaning, and coming home from work. But that really.
But ultimately, I think that, a lot of times he will share at the end, but I feel like I could ask him to share, but I don't think I could force him. So if he says no, then, like a lot of times I say, well, then he's not going to share with his new toy when we get it, kind of like negative consequence, but I guess I could say, oh, if you share, then he'll share his new toy with you too.
Yeah.
When they're at that age, they don't think that far ahead. They think of now, at the moment, right? So when we say, I mean, I said the same thing in the past. Well, your brother is not going to share with you when he gets something new. It's like, who cares?
But sometimes it works.
Sometimes it works, yeah. Sometimes it works. Sometimes, like, I don't care. I just want to.
Yeah, and also I'm thinking that like right when they're fighting about sharing is probably not the best time to try to be able to build character. I mean, it's a short-term thing, but I think for it to be character building, it would have to be a constant thing. I mean, that kind of thing would have to be talked about and shared all the time, so that when incidents like come, it would be a reminder of what they're supposed to do,
Right.
and then
Yes.
through that it happens because.
I think that's a great point. One thing is that when there's when you're in the midst of a conflict, this is actually the case not just in parenting but in marriage too. When you're in conflict in marriage, usually that's not a teaching time for your spouse. It usually blows up in your face.
Don't want any teaching at that time, right? No sermons.
Yeah. Stop criticizing me about that. Okay. I don't need to know that right now. But when it comes conflict with children in the middle of it, yeah, sometimes you do need to first break it up, deal with the issue at hand. But I do think that all of the teaching that's being done is in the way before the conflict and far after. And part of it is also recognizing that that there is, when a child does share something in a good place without conflict, that's a time to say, you know what, you did a great job of sharing. And I really saw how you shared that toy with your brother because you genuinely wanted your brother to enjoy that. And that just speaks a lot about how you're growing. I'm so thankful for that. So just saying those if you see, and that means a parent needs to have, the problem with us tends to be that we have eyes that are always looking for problems, like trouble. But one of the things we're not doing enough is to look for when things are going well. And when things are going well, we have to really see what is going well, why is it going well, and then affirm and encourage. Because then what you're doing is you have places to go back to. So if you're in the middle of conflict, then you say, remember when you shared with your brother that time? Did you see the joy that he had on his face? I saw that, and I saw what you did for him. Why can't you do that now? What's keeping you from doing that now? What's holding you back? So having those type of conversations on an ongoing basis will allow you to speak into that momentary challenge. Does that make sense? In the moment, though, I would say, just like you all said, I would separate the two, have conversations with both. There might be a time, actually, like let's say you had this isn't your case, I think, because what's the age gap between your two sons? See, that's not that much, but let's say the age gap is 10 years. So the little child who's, say, 5 wants the 15-year-old's cell phone, right? Or a laptop, because that's what they're working on, a laptop for school. You're obviously not going to say, you have to share your laptop with that child, right? With your brother or sister. So there is a place to say, this is your brother's. He has it, and he needs it. And so context really matters at that point. If we're talking about, a Spider-Man doll or whatever, what do you call it? You don't call it action figure. Thank you. Yeah. I could not think of I was trying to think of the right word. Thank you. A Spider-Man action figure, right? And that's what I would say. You know what? This is your brother's. I'm going to talk to him about asking if you can have some time with it after it's done. But I want you to know that this is your brother's. This is his, right? And I'd have that conversation, and because there is a place to say that you've given this to him and it belongs to him, and you should share it, and then to have that conversation with the older brother to say, this is something you need to consider doing, and here's why. And it's not, oh, he's not going to share with you. I don't know if that's the right motivation, because then it's tit for tat. Mm-hmm. And remember, whenever you're building a principle, you're giving a message. And you always have to ask, what is the message that I'm giving with that principle? So if I say, if you don't share this, your brother's not going to share it with you, then it's now, if you don't scratch his back, he's not going to scratch yours. So you're teaching already a principle of quid pro quo. It's you only get what you give. And that's not only is it not biblical, but I don't think it's going to serve that child in the end. I think it's going to be about, here's why you should share. And it's not because you're going to get something out of it, but it's because, one, this is, the Lord loves you. He has shared everything, his greatest, and you're responding to that, most of all. And that is the ultimate of what's the driving force. And then secondly is that you model that yourself. You and John model that together. Sharing with your family. So, any other thoughts? Questions?
So I have one more question.
Yeah.
So my younger one has been saying a lot recently that he kind of has to have, like I said, everything that his older brother, right?
Yes.
And clothes, everything. And he's been saying recently, like, older brother has more toys than him. He has more stuff than me. So I try to tell him, look, he's older than you, so he has more.
Yes,
but you'll get more later.
You'll never catch up.
You'll get the hand-me-downs. Yeah.
I think that's a very tough thing, because teaching kids that things will just never be fair. Like, that's at the end of the day, like, it'll never be fair, and you can't make it fair for them. Like, it's just, and for them to go through life thinking everything's going to be fair, I think that it's going to be, a downfall for them, because once they get to times without you, things are going to be unfair, and they're not going to know how to handle it. And so I think it's through these opportunities of conflict, of adversity, that they truly understand, like, that's how you build their character.
But I don't know. How should I explain to 4-year-old that's life is not fair?
Yeah. There's a question that Sue's cousin, when she was young, she would always ask. And so we always tease her about it now, because she's obviously a grown woman, but she used to say, what about me? What about me? And that's a question that, you're right, it is a fairness. I'm looking for fairness type of, I don't want to be left out. I don't want to. And I think, again, you always ask, well, what are you looking for? What do you want out of it? I know for a 4-year-old, it's very hard for them to understand that. And I think there is a place to continue to have the conversations, because birth order, whether we realize it or not, it makes a difference, right? You can probably see that. And I think I touched on this before, but we try to do all we can, and I'm not saying we do it perfectly, we try to not allow the birth order to be the defining identity of how each one responds. And because we have 4, it actually, birth order matters a lot, because it's so, I don't know, it levels off. And especially because Jack is a boy and we have 3 older daughters, older sisters. I think he can feel so entitled that I have to have more conversations with him than I ever did with any of my other 3 daughters about entitlement. Because I'm thinking about the future. I'm not thinking about the now. I'm not thinking about, well, I want him to, he should get that ice cream cone because everyone else got one. He should get exactly the same amount. I'm just thinking, what is he going to be like as a man one day? How is he going to lead his family? How is he going to protect his wife and his children? I want him to provide for them, and it matters. So I think when you're thinking about even a 4-year-old little boy, to have a picture of what do I want him to be like as a man, and to recognize that, as you were saying, Julia, that it's not always about getting exactly the same thing as your brother. So how do you do that, though? I know that's your big question. What do you do, and how do you do that? What do you think? Okay. It's a tough one. I give you a tough one. How do you help a 4-year-old understand that he's not always going to get the same as his brother? Sorry, I gave you a hard one. You know what I do? A 4-year-old is going to be hard to, but I'm just going to explain it anyway. And that's one thing, is that I don't want to underestimate children, even no matter how young they are. But I would try to say, your older brother, he might have more things, but he also has more responsibilities. Like, there are more expectations for him as someone who is older because he understands more. I mean, I know he's not going. The 4-year-old's not going to understand this explanation fully, but to simply say, one day you will have opportunities to, wrong, big word. I'm trying to think of a simple word. You will have a time, to be able. Mommy and daddy are going to be there for you, and we're going to help you and to build you up and help you grow in a way that's different from your brother, because you're a special person and he's a special person. God made you special. God made your brother special. So you're not always going to get exactly what your brother gets, and that's okay. And you don't have to be angry about that. In fact, one day you're going to see that God has something very special for only you. And mommy and daddy have a response. We're supposed to help care for you and protect you and lead you and help you to grow to be eventually a man who will follow the Lord, who will follow Jesus. So don't worry so much about this. Don't be so angry. It might be as simple as that, and then constantly having these conversations as they get older. Another thing is, I would also keep in mind, if I'm treating my oldest son a certain way, to know that, well, how am I treating my youngest son, and what is driving the way that I'm treating them in terms of, say, giving them things, or is it, if I'm, let's say, buying a laptop for my son, who's the oldest son, is it because he needs it and that's what he needs in school, or is it because I just want to favor him more? And favoritism is deadly. That we see in the Bible, right? Favoritism is deadly. And I want you to recognize this, is that whether you realize it or not, you might be playing favorites in your heart. And I think it's human nature to feel that way. So you have to sometimes intentionally go against that to guard yourself from that. Do you find that you ever felt the pull of favoritism?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
I
so
think it depends on the situation. Because I feel like there's definitely times I will do something in favor of Arden, but then there are other times, depending on the situation, that I may do something in favor of Sela. And it's not because I love one more than the other, but there is something circumstantial that made me do something in favor of
Sure. So the circumstances can bring that. Is your heart ever affected by that?
Yeah, I mean, we say behaviors tied to your heart, right, and everything.
Yeah.
But
And a lot of times in families, if there's two parents in the home, the two parents have different favorites. That's what happened in the Bible, right? Actually, it happened a few times. And usually that's deadly. It really can hurt the children. Maybe you had that with them. When you think of your own parents, do you feel like they play favorites?
definitely, that was my huge complaint growing
Yes,
up.
they did. They did.
Yes, of
They
course.
did.
No, I didn't think so, but that's because everybody else said I was the favorite, right? That's favorite doesn't think so.
Yeah.
But
Really? I feel like I was favored by one of them, and I knew it too, and they all thought it too. Although one of my friends does it secretly towards me, especially. From just like, don't tell your brother or sister.
well, see, I actually do that with both of them. So I'm constantly, I think I can honestly say that I don't favor one or the other because they're very different. Right? I have a different, similar but different relationship with them. So they both think I favor, or sometimes they think I favor the other, but they both think that I favor them. So maybe it's because I'm constantly aware that I don't, like, if I seem like I was favoring this one and it could appear that way, I would go to the other one to even it out. So if he happened to look at, happened to see a situation, that I would make sure that, because I don't want them, that to be the issue.
Yeah.
So.
But when you knew you were the favorite one, and then whatever friend did secretly, did it kind of put burdens on them a little bit, or?
It can. It definitely. It's very interesting, when you think of, I think of the Bible, Jacob and Esau. Isaac favored Esau, Rachel favored Jacob, and that created some serious problems in that family. But there is a burden sometimes. Don't you feel that? Or what was, besides Ellen, you said you were the favorite one. Did your family have favorites? Did your parents have favorites?
The only one.
You're the only one. Yes, that's unique. And that has its own unique way of shaping a person, being an only child. I know for me that with my children, I will say this, is that I'm naturally drawn to maybe one of them. I won't say which one, right? I'm naturally drawn to one of them. And so I intentionally fight that feeling because I know that if I let it go, it can severely harm my other children. And I know Sua is naturally drawn to one of them too. And so every once in a while, we're checking in with each other, making sure that what we're naturally drawn to is not dictating how we're operating towards them. And so that's pretty important, I think, for those who have, we all have more than one child. And I do think for those of us who think you don't play favorites or you don't have a heart favorite, and this is, I'm not saying you have a favorite. It's more like there's an inclination. I don't know, just a slight tendency towards one. You have to really assess whether you have one or not, because the scary part is to have one, deny it, but then actually be acting it out without you realizing you're doing it. And so it's almost better to really truly assess it and be like, okay, I know this is the person I favor, so I need to really be mindful of this. It's just something to think
and I
about.
definitely have definitely like a more someone that I'm more in tune with, more compatible.
Yeah.
That I think that's where it comes out in.
Yeah.
But I think because of my attitudes of favoritism growing up, that was so harmful that I try so hard to make sure that it's not it's, you know, it doesn't come
Right.
out that way.
Right.
Where either one would ever feel
Right.
one was actually favored.
So you were the not favored one growing up.
Well, there's contention about that. I really thought I wasn't, but my mom tells me otherwise. I don't know. I don't know. You know, it's hard to say.
Were you the not favored one?
Yeah, well, yeah, I definitely was. In my mind, I definitely was not. But then I remember my sister used to say like, well, I think my parents both favor my sister more, but like definitely my mom, my sister, right? So then I would always say, oh,
How many in your family?
There's 3 of us. And
Three.
there's a brother.
And what number are you?
I'm number 1.
Okay, number 1.
So then I would always say, oh, mom's like favorite daughter, and then she would just counter back and say, dad's favorite daughter, and I think she was saying that, you know, I don't really, you know, I think they both have favorite more, but because I think I felt like, you know, and then I felt favoritism like at school too with the teachers, and that was kind of big when you're young too.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so because I felt it, I think I really tried not to, you know, favor them, and also because this is why I don't like favorite John favors mine, and it's kind of obvious to other people too, except to him.
Yes.
So I really try not, but I wonder because he was the favorite one, so maybe the favorites ones, they don't realize, you know, what it feels like, you know.
That's why you do need someone on the outside speaking into that. If it's very obvious, then it's something that should be addressed because it sends a message. You know, it conveys something to that child, and it impacts them. Again, we have strong influential power over our children, right? Yeah, that's really obvious. So it's important, and that's why the reason I'm even bringing this up, it's the whole idea of intentionality again. That the more and I know this is hard, like, because you might be thinking, oh boy, parenting, it's so hard. It's like, well, we have to, but that's, remember what he said? He said, what did he say? You know, parenting is just hard. You know, it's meant to be hard. And if you're trying to get out of that, well, that's a problem. That's more your problem than it is your children's problem, right? It's supposed to be hard. It's a mess. I actually love that we're here because we're all in agreement that this is hard, and we need to grow in it, and that's okay. It's okay that it's messy. It doesn't always work out perfectly. So don't be discouraged. You know, be of good cheer. Be thankful.
I think it's hard when the grandparents also picks favorites, and it undermines when you're trying to, you know, parent.
Oh, that's a whole other ball wax there. Grandparents. Yeah. I think when it comes to grandparents, always remember this. We should honor our father and mother. We should never worship them. And sometimes a lot of men and women have that umbilical cord has not been cut. You know, and so, but you know who's going to suffer? It's not going to just be your children. It's going to be generational. What if you don't recognize the order of family that God has brought into your family in a biblical fashion, which is that in your family there's order, and your grandparents are not the ones who are overseeing the spiritual upbringing of your children. You are. And once that's displaced, it'll impact the great-grandchildren. It'll keep on going. That. Because you know why they're like that? Why do you think?
Because it happened to them.
It happened to them. And it's happened to them before and before. So generationally, this is something that's been, if you think that this started with you, it just hasn't. It's not the case. It's probably been there in your family for a long time. And there are some sins. Have you ever heard of the phrase generational sin? So we tend to think of that very mysteriously, right? Like there's this mystical sin, that a curse in our family that is being passed down. The curse of adultery is being passed down. But when you really think about what sin is like, if I grew up with, I think I shared this before, my mom is a very fearful woman. Godly woman, but her one real struggle is fear. Fear of, and she used to always say to me as a child, be careful, be careful. Every time she would say, be careful, right? Wherever I go, she'd always say it in Korean. She'd say, be careful. All the time. I mean, I'd be sitting at my desk writing, be careful. What do you think that created in me?
Anxiety.
Yeah, and fear.
Anxious.
I was afraid. One day, when my children were really young, they were just sitting there and they were eating. I think Krista was 2 or 3 years old. And I said, hey, be careful, be careful. I started saying it, right? And then it didn't dawn on me until I said it a few more times, randomly. And then suddenly it just hit me like a lightning bolt. I heard my mom saying it to me. And I thought, I'm instilling that fear into my daughter because that's been instilled into me. Even to this day, if I call on the phone in my office, she'll say, be careful. Today, to this day, as I'm 45 years old, and she's still saying that to me. So I lived a lot. My life early on, I had a lot of fears, a lot. And because she had a lot, she gave it to me. And it's not that she intentionally gave it to me. That's just who she was. So she gives it to me, and because now I'm afraid, it's so easy to parent like that. But the gospel frees me from that. So I'm not living that way anymore. But the cycle has been broken because God is the one who I'm most, or the greatest fear of, not everything else. And that frees me from fear of everything else, which then breaks that cycle. So that's what I'd say is generational sin, is that generational sin is when sin patterns are being constantly repeated and you don't even realize it. And it's just a part of who you are now. And unless someone comes in and speaks into your life and says, and you're favoring your child. And then maybe you need to hear, oh yeah, my mom did that to my sister. And then, oh yeah, her mom did it to her sister. And it's just been passed along, all along, without any idea of where it came from, or why it's like that. You see that? Can you see that happening? So the intentionality of it makes a difference.
Sorry, earlier when we were talking about having those conversations while sharing, Gina said it's just really daunting thinking about having this conversation about sharing every time it happens.
It's daunting because of why?
Takes time.
Takes time.
Parenting is hard.
Parenting is hard. See, I think, remember he said it this time, and I think he said it a previous time. We want self-parenting children. We want children that are already parented. And all we're doing is just going along for the ride. But that's not why God brought us into this world and brought our children under our care. We have a responsibility to steward and shepherd them. Shepherding is really hard, trust me. Someone who that's my job. It's hard. I do it for my kids, it's hard for them. I do it with my wife, it's hard. I do it for my own heart, that's hard too. I do it for my children, that's hard too. So it takes a lot of work. I don't think it's intended to be easy, actually. But there's other reasons why it might be hard. What else?
Sanctification.
Yeah. God is using it for ourselves. Don't you feel like the more you parent, the more you learn more about your own self? If you allow yourself to be assessed that way. A lot of people don't evaluate themselves in the things that they do. They're not self-aware. So they're not considering the impact that life has on them. For us, we who are in Christ, because we're not afraid of people and analysis, we're willing to receive that.
Gina said, because I think I say share maybe 10 to 15 times per day.
So the problem is not share. The problem is why share. See, again, if I say share, it's not going to, I'm creating a behavioral pattern rather than a heart change. But even if you do explain it, you're probably still going to have to do it 1,000 times. I'm still saying it. I'm still teaching it over and over again. And it's just going to keep on happening over and over. I say it to Carissa, who's almost 15 now. I still have to say it. hey, here's what, you still have to teach about it. Don't you have to teach about it?
Yeah.
Right? It's not like it ends all of a sudden.
Yeah.
There are some things, sometimes they hoard something. This is mine. It's all mine. No one's touching it. You know? And I go in and I say, what? Really? You know, really?
Yeah, I don't know that it ends. I mean, but it is that constant conversation that is character building.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like even now we're selfish and we have to remind
That's
ourselves
right.
to share. You know,
You're right. It's constant.
Forget the kids and
Yeah.
think of ourselves.
You're absolutely right. Who here has mastered the heart of a fully giving, generous, kind heart? I mean, I'm not there yet. I have a long way to go. So I need you all to speak into my life. I need my wife. I need sometimes my own children to speak into my life about this. But I would also say that it starts with, don't just give the command. You have to give the reason. And you have to have faith that giving the reason regularly is going to make a difference. Faith is a really important thing. Because if I do it 10 times and I'm tired after that and I say, forget it, this isn't working. And that's the thought is, this isn't working, right? I said, I already told you why you should share. You said I understand, and then they don't do it. And I was like, oh, okay, forget it. This doesn't work. I'm going back to the way that it used to be. You better share right now. You know, faith says that I trust in the long view. This is a marathon. This is not a sprint. I'm not looking for immediate change, as though suddenly they're going to be saying, well, thank you. Because of Jesus and what he's done for me. A 5-year-old saying, I will share everything that I have and I'll do it with joy. I mean, that's just not going to happen, right? Or you're looking for the long view that eventually it will affect them. So if my goal is to try to get them to stop fighting today, then I probably have a very short-sighted goal. That's not the answer. That's not what I'm looking for. I want Elizabeth to be a godly woman who will be generous of spirit as she's growing in her life, as a teen, eventually as a young woman, and then eventually as a woman, as an elderly woman, whatever it might be. Right? I mean, that's what you want. But the moment is going to be hard. So, sorry, Gina. Probably
This
not.
whole character building, I think it does start around 6, and 6 to 12, I think is the toughest time. I'm trying to look at when the most difficult time, exhausting time was between 6 and 12 actually, and actually after they become teenagers, it's become easier, because I can talk with them and I can just say a couple of things and but 6 to 12 was I would have to say it was just probably the most exhausting.
Formative.
Yeah.
The reason why Ellen doesn't have to, well, you can have significant conversations with Isaac and Isaiah because you've built it over time.
Okay.
But if you don't build this now, then when they are 15, 16, 17, again, we're going back to that, right? If you don't do it today, then you're not going to be able to have conversations at that point. They're going to say, get out of my face. I don't want to talk to you. Because that's where, why should they talk to you? You've only given them commands all these years. Share. Who had it first? And so if they have that framework of heart and to say that it's not about the why, they don't understand anything. They just know that you're just a dictator. You just tell what is to be done. And then now you're clamping down even harder. Where are you going? What are you wearing? What are you listening to? And we should say those things, but not that way. But when we're just applying all these rules now, because that's all we've been doing throughout their whole life, is just giving them a bunch of rules and trying to modify behavior. As they get older, you're not going to have the power eventually to modify behavior. Right now you do. But you have to give the reason now with control so that eventually you can really reason and you're going to release control. But you're still going to have control. Okay, so here's an example. Right before, very interesting, before we went on vacation, so we were having a conversation with Chris, our oldest daughter, and she did something that wasn't what we had expected of her. And it was I wouldn't say it's surprising, but it was definitely disappointing. And when this is literally the day before they're going to New Jersey, we're separating. So I went like, oh, we had this long conversation with her, and that night she wept with such a heart of repentance, and that's what we prayed for. And one of the things we both had applied a lot of these principles that we've learned in this class, and I think prior to it, like in other words, held back from anger, not express our disappointment at all, but more of what we want for her, what our desires for her is. And she took some time to think about it, and she was weeping in repentance, not towards us, but towards the Lord. And it was an awesome, tender moment. Because it's okay to fail, and it's okay to sin. Okay, it's not okay, but if there's true repentance and a turning back, right? Because that's what you want to see, because we're all in need of that, right? Who doesn't sin? And so, but we have to also take away certain privileges. It's not like, oh yeah, that's great, we got the result we wanted, so you can do whatever you want to get. We still have to, because there are certain things that teens don't fully grasp. We'll talk about this in the teen section, that it's going to be a challenge. It's like a constant going through things. But I tell you that a lot of the conversations that Ellen, you were talking about at those formative 6 to 12-year-old stages, you will see it pay off when they're teenagers. But it's going to be hard now because they don't fully grasp everything. That's the challenge for the 6 to 12, especially at the 6th year, 6, 7, 8. They don't fully understand what you're saying. But go in faith knowing that if I have this conversation now, by the time they hit 12, it will make a difference. It really will. And you'll see it. But it will be tiring. Any other questions? Any questions online? I hope that helped, Gina. I know it's hard, but it's worth it. It's hard, but it's worth it. Don't give up on it, and continue to have faith. You know the whole idea of say you're sorry. Say it like you mean it. When you think about that, we are creating hypocrites, right? From that, say you're sorry, and they're not really sorry. Don't we do that? It's just not how it's supposed to be. It's actually better for them not to be sorry. And to say, I want you to go to your room. I want you to think about it. I'm going to come back. We're going to talk. I'm going to ask some questions. See what's going on there. And then go back to the room and start having a long discussion. And it can be hours. That's why I think what Ellen was saying is right. I know that for when our kids were in that stage, there were times it was exhausting. Sometimes it could take 2 to 3 hours of the kids sitting there going. And no matter what you say, what you ask, they don't respond, they don't do anything. But don't give up. Continue pressing on. And you're not looking for immediate results. I think you have to get that out of your brain. Like, there's got to be immediate change. Sometimes there will be. Sometimes it can take a while. But that's okay. We're in this for the long haul. But don't go with shortcuts. Say you're sorry. Right? So this is the idea. Whenever you're giving a command, always know why you're giving that command. Why am I asking that child to do that? If you can answer the why and that child, and you're explaining the why, then you can give the command. Without it, you shouldn't give it unless they understand it. Because don't you think that would help you, right? That helps all of us. If my wife if someone tells me to do something, I sort of want to know why. I don't want to be bossed around like a little child, right? But I think actually children need to understand too. It's not that we So I might explain it to them the first time, but the next time I might have to say, you know the reason, we talked about it already, now I want you to do it. In other words, let's say, you have to help set the table because you're a part of our family. And by being part of our family, you have a responsibility to go over something. And that's what I would say is, at 6 years old, they can take responsibility. Don't, especially if they're the younger child, do not let them just simply get away with doing nothing. Give them responsibilities, even if it's small ones. So for us, so we're a family of 4. Even when they were really young, they always had it. Like we split chores up, and meal times they would have different chores during the meal time, such as washing dishes. His chore has always been for a while brushing underneath the table, getting all the crumbs and stuff like that. And then each one of them has different. They have to set the table at different times. They have to clear the table. We never let Jack get away with it doing nothing while his sisters did all the work, because they really could do all the work if they wanted to, and they've offered to do it. We're like, no, Jack is doing. He's a part of our family. Elizabeth is too, so they have to do things as part of our family. Do you all do that?
Try.
Start at the earliest ages. If you don't do it when they're really young, it's going to get harder to actually get them to do it when they're older. Again, the earlier you can establish certain things, the more they will be ready to do it as they're older. But if you try to dive in the mid stage, you're not going to be able to. It'll be a challenge to get them to really pick up things and do things.
I think the problem with that is when you have a parent who is a perfectionist, or you would say, I could do a better job, or you try to redo what the child did because it wasn't washed well.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say give a 4-year-old the job of washing the dishes. You know what I mean? It just wouldn't. It's not going to work. But if they're 12, they might be totally fine doing that. So do you all have your kids actually have responsibilities in the home?
Arden sets the table and sets everything up for me, and then
So
when I put away the dishwasher stuff, Stella helps me put away their cups.
okay, good. Yeah, it's those little things. It's not. I'm not.
I mean, it's the things that I'm okay with them helping with. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's not like putting away like a glass cup. It's like
Yeah.
you put away your own kitty plastic cups, right?
Yes,
Because I know
yes.
you're able to.
Yes. And as they get older, they get increased responsibility. But with increased responsibility comes also increased privileges too, right? So that it all sort of goes together. Like a child that's 16 who's driving, they might have the privilege of driving, but they also might have the responsibility of, I don't know, washing the dishes or cooking a meal or something. I don't know, whatever it might be.
I really struggle with the whole parent thing because with personality differences, like Arden's very like rule follower. He does whatever to make someone approve and be happy with him. Where I felt like she could, care less, probably. I don't know. She just has a very different attitude, very more rebellious, stronger personality, and so. Yeah, and I think it's definitely has, and it's not just because of that. I think it's my doing as well. You know what I mean? Like today, like Stella just threw all our rainbow rubber bands like all over the place. And I asked her to clean up, I don't know, so many times, and she just wouldn't have it. Whereas my oldest one, if I asked him to clean up, he would sort them all away in the same color, same bag. Whereas she would just keep throwing even more rubber bands, and but then like the fault of that is that I'm not giving her consequences for not doing it because I'm trying to like cook dinner and like do all these other things, and so it becomes an inconvenience to like sit there and take a time out to like have that conversation and making her understand why she should be putting those rubber bands away. So I'm at fault for kind of giving this sense of like I can get away with it
Mhm.
to this younger child. You know what I mean?
Sometimes that one over there, when she does something like that, I've been trying to leave the mess for her to pick it up.
And I left it. I didn't like, but it is really hard as a mom to fight that feeling to just go ahead and clean it up because you could do it so fast.
Yeah, I'm guilty of
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, there are like good moments and bad moments where, you know, then the teachable moments. And it's, I think, our choice, you know, and also our burden to make sure we take advantage of those opportunities, in which I, you know, to a fault, don't always, you know.
To all our faults. It's not just you. It's not just you. But amazingly, God is gracious. You know, so even in our failures and our weaknesses, He's the one who's going to do the work. But we do our best, and we grow. So. But sometimes it's okay to have mess. I'm not talking about the rubber band mess. I actually mean, like, for example, I'm sorry, Vic, this is going to impact you. Let's say you said, I just don't have time for dinner. I have to deal with this. I don't want to miss this opportunity. You do that, dinner's not ready, right? Vic comes home, and then you say, mind if we go out tonight? Right? This is what happened. Or we have frozen pizza tonight, you know, whatever. And that should be okay. I think for all of us, we sort of try to live in this world of perfection. It's our perfectionism. We want it all. We want to be able to parent our kids well, be able to do all that we do. And sometimes we're missing opportunities because we're trying to do everything well. And that's where, if you are of a dual parent home, that's the tag team part. You know, that's the part where you might say, okay, I've had to deal with this, so I really need some help in this area. And that might have to happen because this is such a formative time for your children. Any questions online? Anything else?
You know, I had said that it helped regarding what you had said earlier.
Okay.
So thanks.
Going back to, you know, the sorry part when they're not really sorry.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's kind of what they teach at school too. Kind of like,
Yes.
you did something wrong.
Yeah.
You know, that you're going to get in a fight, and then, you know, they say sorry, you apologize, right? And they're probably not sorry, but they say, and like, you know, with my younger son, it's so obvious, right?
That he's not sorry.
That he's not sorry. He's
Yeah.
like, sorry. Like, and I have to like beg him to say it like 5 times before he even says it. And then when he says it, it's very like not genuine. You know, it's obvious. But then like my older one, kind of like, so when he did something wrong, he expects that. He expects that sorry, even though it's not genuine.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
you know, so I do make him say it, but it's just like, you know, like you said, he doesn't really mean it.
Yeah.
So.
I think it's okay not to say it.
But older wants to hear it.
I think
as a closure. I think that's how, you know, I think we taught him that,
right.
you know.
You know, that's where a conversation needs to be had with both again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, again, now you know, go back to what Ellie said, it's a tiring time because you're constantly, especially if you have multiple children, you have to have these conversations constantly. And that's where I would say, I think the first person you do need to talk to is the person who is the offender, right? And if you're really going to try to hold them to not being a hypocrite, you know, and really that's, I know that's a harsh word, but that's what hypocrisy is, isn't it? It's that you say something, but you really don't mean it. And when you think about the world that we live in, that's a really difficult person to be around. Don't you think? Someone who is two-faced, they say something to you, but in their heart they mean exactly the opposite. That's not what you want to develop in a child or in a person to be a person. So you have to think of it this way: what am I conveying to my child? Would I want that child to eventually be a man who is like this? And to me, that's a scary thought. It's one thing to see it in a child, it's another thing to see it in a man or a woman. to be saying sorry or sorry with a smile, but in their heart they despise you. You know that then you're creating, that's an evil person, right? So because I don't want that, I want to work at this, and no matter how hard it is, no matter what time it takes, I want to do it. But it's going to be hard. So that might mean let's go, go into your room. I want you to think about what happened here, what went wrong. I'm going to come. I want you to think, because I really think sometimes they do have a hard time processing that if they're young. So they need maybe a little time apart from the anger. They're always so angry. And so you put them into the room, you have them sit there, and then you go in and start asking questions. Tell me what happened. No, you hit me. And so then you start pointing away and saying, did you really need to throw that Lego at his face? What was going on there? Why did you feel so strongly? Do you know that could have hurt him? What? So that's where we have those conversations, and you help him to see that. And then you start talking about, that's why I think you do bring in the Lord and say, you know what? God loves you so much, and He really, really cares about you, and I care about you. And He loved you so much that He gave His own Son. And when He gave His Son, He was bruised for you. And that bruising, that suffering, is to free you from this. You don't have to be so angry. When you're angry like this, it's hard. It's a challenge for all of us. We want you to have joy. Don't you want to be happy? So anyway, I'm giving a long. It might take a long discussion, thoughts, and questions.
I hated that having to say sorry when you don't mean it. I don't do that, so I didn't want to teach that to my children. I even told my kids at school that you don't have to say sorry if you don't feel it. I didn't know, but at that situation like that, I remember what I used to is the one that wanted to hear sorry wants to hear sorry. So I would apologize as if I was the child, right? So I'm sorry that your brother did this. I'm sure he didn't mean to, but he was angry. I'm trying to go through I understand the psychology of what's going on with the other child. He wanted to share, but you grabbed it, so that's why he hit you with it. I'm really sorry this happened. Da 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 da. And then we separate, and I tell the other one to go in the other room, and while I finish whatever. So while he's in the other room, I'm hoping that he's thinking about what I said to the other one, that he would be feeling the similar things that I said. Maybe in doing that, I acknowledge how he felt about it. So like sometimes I think in situations that I definitely would not allow somebody to say something that they're not feeling just to say it so the other person will hear. So, I remember doing that all the time, and for me that seemed to work. And then if the sorry was heard, the other kid had time to think about whatever, and then I would come back later, giving the other child some time to do whatever, and I get my work done.
So did he come to? Was he really sorry?
Well, what I do is I talk to him about. Later, I would go and talk to him about it, and sometimes he doesn't want to. He's still not, But then later, even though he may not say sorry because he, for whatever reason, but he will do or gesture something that shows that he's really sorry to his brother. That he would, come and bring his toy, or usually would come and just, do things, and then they're fine again. And it took a long time for him this one particular one, to get old enough to actually say sorry. But so I had to just wait a long time for him to actually say it. But without saying, he would do things that show that he said he was, or that showed that he was sorry. But he had a hard time saying it.
I have kind of a problem with that. Not with what you're saying, but just the whole sorry. Like, I feel like, I try to tell my kids all the time that even if you didn't mean to do something, it could have still hurt the other person. And so I get this whole, I didn't mean to, but they still hurt them, and so to me, like, the word sorry is kind of like part of coming to repentance, you know, and yes, we can't make them come to repentance.
But see,
But
if
I
they
feel
did it
like-
accidentally, they say
Yeah.
don't have a problem saying sorry. Usually, like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Oh, you know, I didn't see you, or that sort of thing. But I think the kind of sorry I'm talking about is when they actually knowing that
But
it's a wrong
I
thing
believe
to
that
do or
they,
something.
like today, for instance, you know, Arden kicked Bella, and he last week got into major trouble for kicking Stella because he actually kicked her really hard, and we saw the pain in her face. So he got in major trouble last week for kicking her, and so you know, I talked to him about not doing that because his role is to protect his sister and not to hurt her. Today, you know, they're running around and he kicked her again, and I said, Arden, you kicked her. There are no warnings for that because we already talked about this week. But I started moving over to the kitchen to grab my spatula, and he burst into tears because he knew what was coming. And he was trying to like, no, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't mean to. Those words are so easy to say, I didn't mean to, but he intentionally kicked her. Stella comes running between us and says, no, Mommy, don't hit him. You know, even though she was the one that got hurt. And so I stopped and I said, Arden, I'm going to show you grace because Stella is showing me grace. You hurt her, and she's telling me not to hit you back. You know, so I'm showing you grace because Stella's showing me grace. And he was just like, what's grace? I'm like, grace is getting, you know, free of something that you deserve to be hit, but I'm not hitting you because Stella's, you know, basically like helping you right now.
She's the intercessor.
Yeah, and I was just like, you know, you need to say sorry to her, you know, because I feel like there's like a pride issue. I feel like so many of us don't say sorry because of pride, you know, that I feel like because of what she had done for him, that she deserved a sorry, at least from him, you know, and so I'm torn about that because I know what you mean about not forcing someone to say if they don't mean it, but at the same time, I feel like we're such especially Asian culture, I feel like there is so much pride over that word.
Yeah. There is a lot of pride over that. It is, you know, it's a tension. On the one hand, I agree. I don't think you force it when it's not there. But I do think it is an important word to actually say because there's so many, and men and women. I don't know if there's no gender study on this, but who says sorry more? You know, who's more apt to own up to something? I wonder what. But I would imagine, especially for Asians, men have a harder time saying it. That's my guess, right? And so I do think there is something to saying it. I think for kids, you have to be willing to wait it out. That's the challenge. Is it might take a while for them to both say it and mean it. But I think it's worth it for them to say it, actually mean it, because you're building into them a heart that eventually they can say it. You don't want them actually to not say it because it's too hard to say it. But personality a lot of these are factors too, because every person is different. So for some, they can genuinely say it and mean it, and it can happen quickly. For others, it can take a long time. Again, this is hard, right?
It can take longer, but my son now who says sorry, I know he's really sorry because he's saying it. I mean, he's saying it out of his heart, you know, and you can tell that he's genuinely sorry that he did that. So I'm not worried that he's going to say it just to say it all this time. So, you know, that waiting, I mean, I'd rather have that happen with me, you know, fighting for his will when he's home with me rather than later when he grows up and
he's gone. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
No, I was just thinking about what Julia mentioned, that situation with Arden and his sister. But if you take that situation if they weren't brother and sister, and if he kicked her and she was the wife, and and if he said sorry, over and over again, like an abuser, I'm sorry, it's kind of taking it out of context. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And then the person who is abused would say, no, it's okay. He doesn't need the consequence.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he's taking it really hurt.
Yeah, you know what? I totally wondered whether or not I should give him that spanking anyway, because that was the consequence. But at the same time, in my mind, it was an opportunity to teach him about
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. If it happened again, though,
Yeah.
if you did it again,
Yeah.
then you probably be like,
No.
no, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
that's not going to happen again.
Yeah.
So you're right. This is at the very least, what all the stuff that we're talking about, it's achieving what we want, which is you're thinking through all the things that you can take for granted. If we weren't here sitting here talking about it, working it through, because by nature we take it for granted. And you know why? Because we're lazy. Because we don't want to actually parent our children. We want self-parenting children. We want them to be behaviorally perfect, always listen to everything that we say. There's just no such person. You know why there's no such person? Because the last part, which is idolatry. They worship themselves because we worship ourselves. They have the idol of self because we have the idol of self. And they try to take over God's position. And that's something that is a really great teaching opportunity, is to talk to your children when they do something, and they do something such as they don't share. Like, talk about, do you love this that much? You know that in the Bible there are people who love things so much that they love it more than God. That's called idolatry. And that's, when people worship a little statue or a Buddha or a little bull and they give money to it, they're worshiping that. They love it so much. They think that's going to help them. And you know what? When you are unwilling to share with your brother or sister, you're worshiping that thing more than worshiping God. And that's causing you to act this way. That's the cause of why you're not sharing. You're worshiping yourself. You're a God. So these are things that I've had these conversations with my kids about idolatry, because when they get to that place, it really opens their eyes in ways that just simply saying, hey, you better share. When they start seeing what's going on in their heart, they're much more apt to actually want to do the things that they do. And if you can walk alongside with them to talk about idolatry, it will tremendously aid them in helping them to understand the bigger picture of why they're doing what they're doing. So there's tremendous value of talking about idolatry with your kids. And everything is an idol when we're with our children, because everything's an idol with us. We worship comfort. That's why we have problem parenting, because we love comfort. We don't want our kids to create the mess, the spilt milk, the tantrum. To us, that destroys our comfort and our idolatry of comfort. We worship our own children, and we worship our marriage. We worship something. It's seductive. Any last thoughts? Yeah. All right, I think we are done for today. So really, really want to hope that the Lord just blesses you in this really wondrous, challenging season of parenting. Let me pray for us. Father, we just want to come before you and acknowledge that it's hard. And sometimes it can be so discouraging because we don't always see the fruit that we want. But I pray that you would give each of these men and women eyes of faith, that what they're planting, gracious seeds in their own children, the message of the gospel by what they say and do, it's going to make a difference in their children's lives, not just for tomorrow, but for 10, 20, 30 years from now. And I pray that we would see that our greatest hope of leading our children well is the glorious work of your Son Jesus. That we are unrighteous. We don't have enough patience. We worship idols. We try to displace you from our lives. And you're still faithful to us. May that be what our children see deeply in their hearts. So we love you and we thank you. And ask and pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, everyone. And thanks, Anne, for the snacks.